Hello and welcome to Two Contexts Fueling Fundraising Vodcast. This week I spoke to Terri Broussard in Austin, Texas, and we covered the 4 key steps to turn a moment into a movement for your organization, how we can get buy-in from loads of different stakeholders and really light that fire when it comes to really creating an identity and a movement for your organization. Whether you're a non-profit, charity, alumni organization, there'll be loads of great points in here that will help really stir that energy in your community. Enjoy. Hey Terri, and thanks so much for joining me today on the Two Tech Fueling Fundraising podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. This is going to be a whole lot of fun, and I can't wait to get into it.
I agree. Thanks so much. So as I said, I've spent a little bit of time having a look at you online, but there's a lot going on there. So I guess what would be really helpful for me and our audience is to give a bit of background on yourself, really, a bit of the journey, how you've come to so far, and the kind of projects that you're working on at the moment. That would be fantastic.
Sure. So for, some of your listeners and viewers that I haven't met, I'm Terri Broussard Williams. I live in Austin, Texas, and I have a platform called Movement Maker Collective. And on that platform, I help people understand how to be a leader that will turn a moment into a movement. And so I think you can do that through policy, philanthropy, or finding your purpose, finding your fire. And so I have stories, strategies, and tools at movementmakercollective.com that people can use to build those movements for social good.
Fantastic. And you talk a lot about of stories there, and a lot of the charities, non-profits that we work with talk a lot about getting your story across to your donors and your community is a really powerful message. So obviously you've spent a lot of time working on these messages. What are some, I guess, some good tips or advice to getting these powerful stories out, how to resonate with your audience?
Yeah. So I think it depends on, your mission, what part of the world you are in, and how you want to show up. Some nonprofits might be really driven by data. They might want to use scientific information and lead with numbers. Other nonprofits might really want to tug at your heart, right? They might want their story to just come from the belly and just really tug at your heart. But I say no matter what type of nonprofit you are and what type of story you want to build, there are 4 things that you should do. And it'll not only help you build followership or, those people that will be a part of your journey who are your followers, but it will allow you to really share your message. And I call it the fire starter formula. So the first step is really understanding your cause or your why. When we start with why, people tend to want to join your movement or follow your mission because they can see a little bit of themselves in that cause. Then you'll want to build a collaborative, people that will be diverse cultural ambassadors of your mission. And you'll want to build that table to be very long and very wide. And you really want that collective to be people that will also hold you accountable, right? You want them to hold you accountable to really fulfilling the story that you tell. And then you'll want to communicate that story. So that's the third C, communicate. And you'll want to really have the elements of the story. If you are a data-based nonprofit, you want the talking points to really reflect that. If you are a nonprofit that wants to speak to the hearts and minds of people, you want to communicate that through the way that you tell your story. And you also want the people that are part of the collective or that second step to really be empowered to share your story in the community. I call those people cultural ambassadors or fire starters. And the fourth C in the fire starter formula is really doing the work to create change. And that would be when you would go out in the community and use each part that we talked about before to really unleash the power of your mission. And when you really do that, you not only tell the story of your nonprofit and your mission, but you truly are being a leader that's turning the moment into a movement. And at some point, you'll turn around and there'll be a whole bunch of people following you, really holding hands and fulfilling that mission.
They are some fantastic points there, and I really like the cultural ambassador point that you use there, because that's something that we really encourage, our communities to adopt. Is so it's not just the people at the top of the organization spreading the
Yeah,
message, because you want it coming from as many different angles as possible,
that's
right?
right.
And really interesting the phrase you used there. to hold you accountable as well. So can you go a little bit more into that? Is that to make sure that you're almost saying true to the promises that you make to the rest of the audience, or anything else like that?
Yeah, so that's tied to the second step of the fire starter formula, the collective. So when you're building that coalition or you're pulling people together at the table, again, you want it to be very long, very wide. You want as many people to be a part of that as possible. And they should be reflective of the community that you're serving and your beneficiaries. You really want, to be able to show both internally and externally that you are reflective of the people that you're serving. And so those cultural ambassadors, the coalition members, the people that are part of your collective, not only do they have to fulfill or understand your mission so that you can fulfill it, but you also want to give them metrics and benchmarks of the things that you're setting a fire in the world. So those outcome measures are very transparent and they can hold you accountable. Some of these cultural ambassadors might, be sharing your message. They might be communicating it. Others might be sitting at the board table, looking at your finance documents, looking at your strategic plan and make sure that you are on target. Others might be a part of your donor community. They might be the people that, will read that year-end report and ask questions about where their money went. No matter where they are in that philanthropic journey or how they help you fulfill your mission, you want them to understand how you will use their information and their power for good because they truly are fueling the fire of your nonprofit.
I absolutely love it. And I think going right back to the bottom of that, so that's obviously you talked about going right from like the top, so the board members, etc., who are part of these ambassadors, but also at the bottom. So how does someone go from, for example, just being a donor, say they donate $10 to becoming an ambassador? Because that's a really key jump, because they go from just donating to spreading the message, holding accountable.
Yeah.
Like how do you get people involved? Do you give them extra responsibility? Do you invite them to events? Or how do you make that transition from, donor, or I'm just interested, into, they're an ambassador for your organization now?
Well, that's the work of the fourth part of the, fire starter funnel, the change that you really want to see, right? And so you can totally take someone from, an online donor and supporter to an offline ambassador, but you have to be very intentional about how you build that volunteer's career ladder and allow them to be a part of your own journey. And so, there's this one volunteer that when I worked at a nonprofit for a very long time doing advocacy and government relations, but I met a volunteer who would always click on our action alerts. In the US, when we are moving legislation forward, we might email our beneficiaries, donors, and volunteers and say, click on this link, send a message to your state rep, and you will let your voice be heard in Washington. And so she was consistent in clicking and taking action offline. And then we noticed she started to give $10. You mentioned $10, and that's what made me think of her, to her local Heart Walk. Well, we invited her to the Heart Walk, one, so that we could meet her, and two, so she could like man our booth that was based on advocacy and government relations at that Heart Walk. Well, she quickly began to come on like offline to our events at the Texas State Capitol. And once we did that, we could see a very sincere interest in her. So we moved her along to the next step, which was our grassroots action team. That was a group of people that got together in person and they talked about policy issues. Well, then she became the chair of the grassroots action team, which led to her being on the state advocacy committee and just kept going. And so now she is a part of the national board that takes action on advocacy issues. So once you really understand that person's intent and how deep they want to be a part of your mission, you truly can build a career ladder. But not everyone is going to want to go from online to offline, right? So you can still build those type of communities even in a virtual environment, so that person can still click that mouse to take action on sending a note to their lawmaker. But then you might ask them to, lead a Facebook group, like, post messages every day, being a cultural ambassador online. Or you might ask them to, post some messages on Instagram that are tied to your mission or help you with some TikTok videos. There's still space online for cultivating your message and getting your volunteers to take action. You just have to truly understand what is it that that person wants to get out of it, how they want to serve your community, and then give them the tools that they need so that they can just, be empowered to take action in the way that they see fit.
That's really, really interesting actually, because what you're saying is actually, because when you think about this, if someone comes up to you and be like, oh, would you like to be an ambassador for our charity, that's like, that could be quite a lot. It's like, oh, what's the
Yeah.
responsibility involved in that? That seems like quite a lot, a little bit scary maybe. What you're actually saying is, like, you use that example there, as someone who started by just making clicks, then a donation, then you were like, oh, would you like to come to the booth, kind of thing. So you're kind of like nurturing their interest in a way. Or someone goes down a slightly different path, oh, you find out they quite like social media or TikTok or something like that. So you're actually like finding out what that person is interested in and giving them their own opportunity to be an ambassador in their own way, almost, rather than just like there's like a one size fits all ambassador. And I think that's a really important point. I think that maybe we can get better at advising our clients out that it's just not just one type of ambassador.
That's right.
There's loads and loads of different ones. Right.
Well, and I know a lot of your clients are in the fundraising space. So I think it's like very similar to the way that you might approach a donor. First you listen to that donor, you understand what they're interested in and where there might be an alignment with your own organization's mission. Then you spend time like really like helping them understand your organization and getting to know them. And then you might make the ask for something particular and specific, so that you can get a really large donation, hopefully. So it's the same thing. You allow that volunteer or that cultural ambassador to choose their own adventure. But again, you're listening, getting to know them and understanding what fuels their fire, and then allowing them to really take action in a way that is meaningful to them and beneficial to your own mission.
Yeah, we hear this a lot, and it's all about, relevance. And it's, in this case, it's making your ask relevant. I mean, in terms
Right.
of that, and to find out, to make things relevant, you've got to do the hard work and really understand what the individual, what makes them up, what do they do on their day-to-day basis, what makes them tick, what do they want to achieve and help. And then you can, after that, really slot in and hopefully build them along this ambassador path, which is, you know, absolutely fantastic. I'm not sure I was in for time actually, but I'm really enjoying this. So, and in terms of, so right back to the beginning, in terms of understanding your cause, that's obviously the first steps. That's something, I guess, as an organization, you need to sort of have a look at yourself first, understand what you're trying to achieve. Now, are there any big kind of mistakes that organizations might make when they're trying to understand their
Yeah,
cause?
that's a great question. And I've seen it happen time and time again. And hopefully, with everything that's happened in 2020, in the US, we've had racial unrest. Across the world, we're dealing with a pandemic. The coronavirus has caused us to think differently about how might we do our work and the way that we show up in communities. And so I think all of that has changed us a little bit if you are in the philanthropic space, right? You tend to think more inward. Why am I a part of building social movements for good or helping nonprofits move forward? And so I really hope that we use that lens as we move forward to do our work. And so where a lot of people have mistakes is where or when they think of, what is it that I want you to do for me, right?
Yeah.
When they are, a practitioner that is talking at the community and is not listening and working with the community. We can't just be of the community. We have to be a part of it. We have to be within it. And so if we use that lens, just as we have throughout the pandemic, of how might I serve my community? How might I, fulfill this mission in a way that is deeply connected to all that are around me? Then I think we begin to show up differently, and we can really be more in alignment with the donors, the volunteers, and the stakeholders who show up for us every day.
Yeah, and I think that's a really nice point, especially to finish on as well, is that it's actually not looking at your donor base as just pools of money to come in and what they can do for you, but actually can you
Yeah,
be a vehicle for the change that they want to enact on society as well? So you're actually
right.
working for them, and as soon as you start changing the way you're thinking about that, I think you can be a lot more successful, both to the charity and hopefully offer that to your donor base
Yeah,
as well.
it's a partnership, right?
Yeah,
We're doing this work together, and so when we can build out and truly be leaders, nonprofit and philanthropic leaders that are turning moments into movements, then we're going to do it together. We're not going to do it alone.
yeah, and I think that when you are going out for donations as well, if you are in the mentality of, oh, we're just going to look for donors here, then I think that when you're speaking to people, they can pick up on that as well, that it's seen as a one-way relationship. But if you go in there with a genuine thought for it, that you're actually trying to help them achieve some of their goals, then I think it comes across a lot better anyway. And both parties are going to be a lot more successful. So that's a really nice, just a little tweak in the way that you're thinking about fundraising as well. But that's us for time. So thank you so much for your time today. There's so much in there that I know that our listeners are going to be really interested in. So yeah, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll definitely.
Absolutely. And I get a little more into how to build followership, how to build out that fire starter formula. And my very first book, it's called Find Your Fire. And you can get all the details at movementmakercollective.com or terrybwilliams.com. So thank you for having me.
No worries. Thank you so much.